The Berlin apartment might be the most emotionally loaded 3 hours you can spend in a game this year, if you can tolerate a whole lot of slow walking and busy work to get there. This is one of those games where the story is doing push-ups while the gameplay is sitting in the corner eating paste. And that split is exactly why some critics are throwing 8, 5s at it while others are like, yeah, that's a 6 at best. Today we're breaking down what this thing actually is, how its 4-time hopping stories work, why people are arguing about whether it's brilliant or boring, and whether it deserves a spot on your backlog if you're not already a Berlin history nerd. Quick context so we're on the same page. The Berlin Apartment is a narrative adventure, very much a walking sim from German devs BTF and Blue Backpack, out on PC, PS5 and Xbox Series. Everything happens inside one apartment in Berlin across almost 100 years. In 2020, a handyman named Malik is renovating the place and brings his daughter Dilara along. She finds little relics left behind by old tenants, and every object becomes a doorway into a self-contained vignette. 1933, under rising Nazism, 1945 in the ruins after the war, 1967 in the GDR censorship machine, and 1989 with the Berlin Wall still standing right outside your window. The pitch is simple. 4 lives, 1 apartment, a whole century of oppression, hope, and really questionable wallpaper choices. Here's the catch. Everyone basically agrees the writing and performances land. And everyone also agrees the game part is extremely light. Where they split is whether the interactivity helps the story or actively gets in the way. One reviewer talked about a 15-minute stretch that had them in tears. Another called the gameplay tedious and said the stories never fully clicked together. That's a huge gap. Moment to moment, this is classic walking sim territory. You move slowly through small spaces, look at objects, listen to dialogue, read subtitles. The twist is that each era gives you one little mechanical gimmick. In 1989, you're throwing and steering a paper airplane across the Berlin Wall, trying to reach a girl's window on the other side while guards patrol below. In 1945, you're a kid in a bombed-out flat collecting scraps to decorate for Christmas and literally warming up a frozen room. In 1933, you're packing a suitcase as an elderly Jewish cinematographer forced to flee, deciding what tiny pieces of your life fit into one bag. In 1967, you're a sci-fi author wrestling with a state censor, making dialogue choices and watching your novel warp into propaganda in real time. On paper, that sounds great. Each mechanic mirrors the character's emotional situation. In practice, it depends a lot on your patience level. The more positive takes see these actions as quiet physical metaphors that make you feel what the characters are going through without big set pieces. Packing Joseph's suitcase as he abandons his home is a simple pick objects up task, but when you realize that everything you leave behind is basically a memory you're erasing, it hits harder than a cutscene would. Same with decorating the ruined apartment for Christmas. The light literally grows as you place objects, turning a cold ruin into something briefly livable. The harsher takes argue the exact opposite. That too many of these moments turn into clunky fetch quests or fussy interactions that actively distract from the dialogue. Folding a paper plane with analog stick motion sounds cute. Trying to do it while reading subtitles and following emotional beats is a lot less cute. One critic basically said, "I'd rather it just lean fully into being a visual novel than force these half-hearted minigames just to justify being called a video game." That's the core tension here. If you're cool with press X to feel something, and you like slow, deliberate pacing, you'll vibe. If the phrase "collect every object in the room to trigger the next line" makes your eye twitch, this is going to test you. Structurally though, the anthology concept is strong. The 2020 framing with Malik and Dilara isn't just filler, it's the anchor. You keep coming back to this half-renovated, half-ruined apartment and watching it slowly transform. As you see it across 1933, 1945, 1967, 1989, and 2020, you start recognizing corners, windows, even the way walls moved as the city changed. One reviewer compared it to an anthology like What Remains of Edith Finch, and that's fair. It's that same idea of many lives layered into one house. Where opinions split again is whether the stories actually connect thematically, or if they're just four good short films that happen to share and dress. Two reviewers felt there's a clear through line. Life under different flavors of authoritarianism, the way ordinary people bend, but don't totally break. Another thought the vignettes feel surprisingly disconnected, like they gamed one or two more stories to make the timeline feel complete. Tiny structural spoiler in 3, 2, 1. The sequence a lot of people single out is the 1967 writer story. It's the one time the game really lets you play with branching possibilities, bouncing between the apartment and a fictional spaceship as your sensor keeps forcing corrections into your book. It's meta, it's playful, and it finally gives you some agency instead of just walking and listening. If the rest of the game had that same level of interaction layered onto its ideas, we might be talking about a genre great instead of a really good experience. Spoilers over. Technically and visually it's kind of the same story, charming and rough in equal measure. Everybody loves the art direction. The apartment changes dramatically between eras, with different color palettes, furniture, and clutter. Just standing in the same room in 1933 versus 1989 tells you a lot about how Berlin shifted. One reviewer called it a constant visual treat, and even the more critical takes agree that in screenshots this thing looks gorgeous. In motion, it's a little more indie janky. You've got simple animations, sometimes stiff or lifeless, a bit of texture clipping and reports of frame rate dips and weird camera hiccups on PC, especially when you've got a lot of debris or tiles flying around. The good news is it's not demanding. There are resolution options that go hilariously low, so if your rig is aging, this is one of those it'll run games. Audio-wise, voice acting is a big part of the experience. Multiple reviewers highlight the performances as a standout, with one calling out the German dub in particular as the way to go if you're okay with reading. English voices range from good to a little flat and expository, and the writing can lean on characters explaining history out loud instead of trusting visuals. So if you're the kind of player who already knows the basics of Berlin's history, you might end up thinking, yeah, I get it, stop lecturing and let the scene breathe. Lengthwise, you're looking at about 3 to 4 hours for a full run, maybe 5 if you're poking around for achievements. That's longer than a movie, but way shorter than your average big budget game. And that's where the value question hits. One camp argues that the emotional punch, especially in the 1945 and 1933 stories, absolutely justifies a short runtime. Another camp wishes there were at least 1 or 2 more vignettes, or a stronger narrative spine tying everything together before calling it great instead of nice tribute. It's very much in that 2 relaxed evenings with a blanket and a hot drink territory. If you're still here, you're probably at least curious about this kind of slower, story-first game. So I'll give you the straight veteran game take. As an interactive short story collection, the Berlin Apartment is strong. It uses one cramped space to say a lot about history, power, and what survives after people leave a place behind. But as a video game in the traditional sense, it's bare bones, and sometimes its own mechanics trip over the story it's trying to tell. If you can live with minimal gameplay, some janky animation, and a lot of talking, there's a good chance one of these vignettes is going to stick with you for a long time. If you need systems, challenge, or puzzles to stay engaged, this is probably a hard pass. If this kind of no BS narrative breakdown is your thing, hitch a ride with Veteran Game and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next weird little gem or glorious train wreck. And now the big question for you. Are games like the Berlin Apartment the future of storytelling in the medium, where interactivity is just a light seasoning? Or should walking sims stop pretending and go full interactive movie instead?